Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, how you doing, everybody? Wow, what a weekend. Another great one. July 20th, 2020. So that's really something. What are we doing? 7/20/2020. Lots of 20s there. I don't know if that means anything to you. It probably, nothing means anything to you at this point. I don't see how it could. But, well, you know, when we lose our footing like this, we turn to Greg Dworkin early to try to get our feedback underneath us. It was another hell of a weekend. I don't know. Probably defies explanation. A big news over the weekend, people watching bits and pieces, if not the entirety, of the Trump interview on Fox News Sunday with Chris Wallace. Hard to know exactly what to make of it other than the president is out of his mind, and lots more people will see it. And I think it will be impactful for that reason. But in addition to that, well, lots of back and forth about whether or not Chris Wallace did a good or good enough job. There was mixed reviews, and you can find anything you want in there in terms of how to interpret how Chris Wallace did. There was some praise for his pushing back hard and refusing to let the president, in some instances, get away with his usual BS. In other instances, he let things slide. I mean, of course, the volume of nonsense is just so enormous that no interview, you can't have an interview with Trump, and it won't continue. And I imagine that Trump would just walk out of any interview that actually pushed him on every instance in which he lied, obfuscated, or otherwise misled people. That you just wouldn't be able to get through anything. I found the whole thing very interesting. So, lots of people saying, good, it's good that this happened. A lot of people saying, interesting that only Fox News is the outlet that turns out to be the one that's willing to push back enough to try and at least reveal some of his true character, some of his true nature. Others saying, why are we practically giving the Pulitzer Prize to Chris Wallace for having pushed back on obvious lies? And there were so many that he let slide. Take it for what it's worth. The point is, the president, I guess the thing to focus on is the real point, that the president is out of his mind, and he went on television and showed everybody. I watched bits and pieces, some of which, this is the other story of it, some of which were circulated by Fox, some of which were circulated by Trump's opponents, some of which were circulated by Trump. That's the real issue, is Donald Trump agreed to the interview on the premise that he would kick Chris Wallace's ass, or anybody else's who came to interview him, and show everybody what an amazing, on-the-ball genius he is. And, of course, he was destined to fail miserably in doing so, but likewise was destined to have a staff around him who would say he did, in fact, accomplish his goal, and walked all over Chris Wallace, and he really gave him what for and showed him who was boss. You likely saw the clips of his discussion of the COVID-19 pandemic, in which he insisted, well, you know what? The major theme that emerged for me was that in 2 days over the weekend, I saw two clips in which Trump made some stupid false lie of a point, and Chris Wallace said, no, that's not true, or you're exaggerating, or you're not telling the real story. And Trump got outraged, huffy, and practically stopped the interview and demanded that the documentation to prove that he was right and Chris Wallace was wrong be brought to him. And the documentation was produced, and thumbing through it, it turned out, because, you know, Chris Wallace is not crazy and Donald Trump is, that Trump was absolutely wrong. And the interview for air had to be edited, I guess. I don't know how long they spent thumbing through things to try and find the evidence that Trump insisted existed in the document but didn't. And I was a little bit disappointed, at least in the clips that I saw, that there's no... I wanted video of the moment. Like, I wanted to see Trump's face when he realized For instance, the first such exchange was that he said, in the Biden-Sanders compact, I guess that's what they're calling it. Apparently there was I missed the whole thing of this document's existence, but apparently some sort of compact between the two campaigns about the, I don't know, I guess the issues and platform issues that would be addressed in the official Democratic platform once that was formulated and adopted in whatever passes for a convention for the Democrats. And he insisted he wanted to make this this is one of their defund the police things. And so he said that this was in this compact, and Wallace said it's not, and it wouldn't be, because the compact predated certainly that particular phrasing. I'm sure that the compact has some language, and it does, that addresses the generalized Black Lives Matter issues and others surrounding it, but the defund the police, abolish the police stuff would never, even if it didn't predate it, would almost never, you would think, make it into a document like that in those words. And so they thumb through it. But again, he stops the interview and he huffs and puffs and he says, all right, fine. You think it's not in there? I'll show you. Bring me the document, please. I'm going to write in this guy's face. I'm going to show him where it is. And they thumb through it and it's not there. And he finds all sorts of other things he doesn't like. Basically, I wanted to see what happened at that moment where he realizes it's not in there. And I wanted to see whether he says, all right, well, someone's given me a doctored document, or whether he throws the papers in the air and says, who cares? This whole thing is stupid. Or whether he does that weird sheepish grin where sometimes when he's caught dead to rights and usually everybody knows it, but somehow he acknowledges it, but he won't say it, but he looks like he knows what's going on. I was curious to see which reaction there would be, but I guess they had to edit it for television because, I don't know, maybe they spent 20 minutes thumbing through. Although I would have liked to have seen that too. They should put that up on the website. They later had another blow up over another issue surrounding, that went down to documents. This one about the COVID-19 pandemic, in which he's questioned about the reality of the pandemic, and Trump instead says, you say we have a terrible death rate or case numbers, and I was told, that says out too, right? I was told, somebody told me, I don't tell you who, I don't know who it was, doesn't matter, maybe it was told it, maybe it wasn't. I was told we have the best death rate, which, the best death rate is no death rate, of course. But, he says, well, I heard that we actually are doing the best in terms of the number of people who are dying for per infection, or I don't know what metric it was that he wanted to use. But he's, again, does the thing. All right, you want to see? Bring me the document, and again, they have to splice things together, and Chris Wallace has to explain. The reality is, based on the description of, let's say, I think, and he used the Johns Hopkins number, is that the U.S. is, 7th in the world, I guess, among major countries, and they might not count all the various territories that Worldometers counts, but about 7th in the world in terms of death rate. I know the Worldometers tells us about the same thing, because they're real numbers, and they're pretty close to the Johns Hopkins numbers. They do differ. And instead, he calls Kayleigh McEnany over and says, Kayleigh's got the numbers that show that we have the best death rate. I'll show you the chart. And she brings a chart over, and the chart is a different chart. It's about the death rate, but it shows a different group of countries, for one thing. The Johns Hopkins, I guess, thing is all countries in the world ranked. And this one is from the European CDC, and it focuses chiefly on Europe, but also some other hot spots like the United States, Russia, and Brazil were on the chart. But it's a different group of countries. But the other thing is that chart still doesn't show the United States having the best death rate. And what he's, I think, looking at is it's lower than Spain's and lower than Italy's, and that's true and has always been true. They got hit early and hard and before anybody knew what they were looking at. And we got hit only a little bit later than that, but at least we knew it was, COVID-19, and we figured out what we were supposed to maybe try to do about it. Early on, we had no success with it. But he's sitting there with a chart that doesn't show what he says it shows, and I would like to know, what did it look like to see him come to that realization? Did he come to that realization? The rest of the interview also, very similar. I don't know how many more blow-ups they had over documents, but the whole thing was quite disconcerting. Also quite disconcerting, one, the fact that Greg isn't here yet, but now he's here. He's remedying that thing. But the other disconcerting item of the weekend that I don't think I have much to say about is Kanye West. I guess he didn't. I heard over the course of the end of the week, he was in and then he was out. I had heard the last thing on Friday. I think we learned, all right, he's out. But no, on Sunday he had I don't know what you would call it, press conference maybe, in North Charleston, South Carolina, and I don't know, he showed up in body armor, and he said some things, and people were describing it more as a mental breakdown than as a press conference. I don't know what it means. I think nothing, but I think I have nothing to say about that one. I just don't. And there's more, and Greg's here, and he knows all the things. So, good morning, Greg. How are you?
Good morning.
Astonished, I'm sure, yes?
Well, as far as Kanye West goes, I mean, basically the guy's mentally ill. He has, a manic disorder of some sort.
Yes.
He's not taking meds. And that's really all you could say about it. It was bad. And the people who were there for this rally thought it was bad, and they wanted him to
that
stop.
That also seemed to be true. And, and I've seen some opinions expressed that maybe it's entirely possible I didn't understand what he was doing. You bet. There's no doubt about it. Might be because I don't understand where he's coming from. Might be because he was having a mental breakdown, and I don't understand that either. So
I'll just leave it at that. Right. There's not much to be said. No, you don't have to take it seriously in terms of politics, but you can feel bad for him.
There's plenty of feel bad to go around. I'll sneak this in. Bill in Portland was Portland, Maine, not the one that's under siege yet, but pointing out another wonderful item from the interview with Trump was when he realized I still don't know any more adjectives than the word beautiful. Right? We're talking about changing the army base names. We won 2 beautiful world wars from these bases, which you could spend an hour psychoanalyzing that, but beautiful.
The death counts were the best.
That's right. I
especially like the siege of Stalingrad. I think there's a Rolling Stones song about that.
Okay. Yeah, it gets mentioned.
Yeah, Okay. It was just so beautiful. It was like they made an anthem for it. So I play Sympathy for the Devil all the time.
I'm worried that the third one won't be as beautiful if we don't have these fantastic. The whole base change. I could do another
or maybe
hour.
Ray Walston and Damn Yankees. It's just like it's really, really into this sort of stuff.
He's an oddball. This president we have. All right.
Well, so, I think David Rothkopf kind of summed everything up here from what was a really depressing weekend, of course, with John Lewis's death. But Rothkopf said, I think America is pretty much, quote, conventions, schmenventions. Who needs them? Who needs the campaign? Let's just vote and kick this methane-inflated, decaying orange cow to the side of the road where he belongs. The funny thing is, Rothkopf is like one of these foreign policy, straight-laced, diplomatic types.
Well... This will do it to anybody.
I think he's had it.
Yeah, I guess so. That seems to have done the trick. Whew.
Yeah, so I thought that was, harsh but fair.
Yes, good marks for that.
Right. And, of course, I'm saying it now because otherwise I'd forget about it. But notable that Alan West is the new GOP chair in Texas.
Yeah, I got such a flood of horrors. Yes, that too. Thank you.
So, we also had, of course, Go Navy Beat Army. When Army tried to beat Navy veteran Christopher David, who was an Iron Man and just stood there and took everything.
Oh, my God. Yeah, that was another amazing thing.
Wow. Portland is an example of what Trump and Barr want to do, but it's not particularly working. And, of course, one of the big things that, besides the pandemic stuff, that came out of this weekend is the enormous a reflection of what's going on with the Washington Post polling that came out. So maybe we'll start there. You could start anywhere. All of this is in the pundit roundup. But let's take a quick look at the Washington Post poll, and then we'll take a look at some stories about Deborah Birx.
All right. Oh, yes.
Delving into the details of the Post-ABC poll, Matthew Iglesias says, it seems like the uncontrolled pandemic and historic unemployment are hurting the president's numbers.
Oh.
And he should maybe try to make the living standards go up rather than down.
That's
That's a reasonable, political theory there.
I'll take it
you
under
could do well by
advisement.
doing good.
Sure. Yeah, it's a pretty well-worn formula.
Right. So what we have here is pandemic surge damages Trump, boosting Biden's White House bid. This is the ABC News version of it. I warn you before giving you the link that it's an autoplay, so you're going to have to shut that off if you look at it. But there's some pretty dramatic numbers in there. 3.5 months ago, the two candidates were virtually even in trust to handle the pandemic. Trump was +2 over Biden, actually. And today, Biden leads Trump on the issue by a 20-point margin, 54-34.
Seems like a small swing.
In my view, this is the driving factor that's going to make the election be what it is. It's bigly and huge.
Yeah, I have not seen anything quite like that. Well, we haven't seen a pandemic. So
right. Biden's advanced nearly to par with Trump in trust to handle the economy.
Okay.
Right.
Why not?
It was Trump 50-42, and now it's Trump 47-45, so it's basically tied. Biden leads Trump by 9 points on handling crime and safety, which is obviously relevant to Portland, but also Lafayette Square and what Trump views as crime and safety, and the law and order, which law and order, I guess, is yelling at that kid with the lawnmower.
That's his law and order.
Right. A focal point of Trump in recent weeks. And on race relations, Biden leads by his largest margin, 25 points, 58-33.
Okay.
So they note for the obligatory part that Biden has a pronounced lack of enthusiasm for his candidacy, as if that's important. People voting for Biden are voting against Trump, so it doesn't really matter. The president, moreover, has other challenges ranging from performance assessments to personal attributes. As reported Friday, approval of his handling of the pandemic has fallen from 51 to 38. With disapproval up 15 points, he's lost 7 points in approval of his handling of the economy to 50%, with disapproval up 9. And his overall job approval rating is 39. Always nice to see him below 40.
Yeah.
Now, here's the more important part. His disapproval is up 22 points since March among those very worried about catching the virus to 82%.
Okay.
And it's also up in 2 of his key support groups. Disapproval is up 20 points among rural Americans, and it's up 12 points among evangelical white Protestants. Okay,
Yes.
Disapproval also is up, especially among Southerners, by 18 points, and blacks, women, moderates, and suburbanites, all 15-16.
Okay.
Right? Democrats now disapprove nearly unanimously of Trump's work in office. That's up 17 points in 3.5 months.
That's
95.
Yeah, wow. I mean,
Percent.
okay, Democrats, but still, yes.
Okay. And among Republicans,
Yeah.
16% disapprove. That's up 10 points from late May.
Okay.
Biden leads Trump by 26 points in being seen as having the better personality and temperament to serve as president. A vast 76%, 1776, a vast 76% of Americans say Trump, in talking about people he disagreed with, crosses the line in terms of what's acceptable.
Yes.
He's
Me too.
61% say he's done more to divide than unite the country.
True also. Good job,
Biden
everybody.
leads by double digits on understanding the problems of people like you, 17
Nobody
points.
understands my rules.
And people like me, 25 points. No, that's
oh,
opposite.
all right.
People like you and me, 17 points.
I
I just
see.
made that last point up.
Oh,
Being
okay.
more honest and trustworthy, 14 points. Better representing your personal values, 12 points. And having a better idea of what America should stand for, 10 points.
Yeah, or any idea.
Trump pushes to parity on one thing. Who's the stronger leader? They're even at 45-45.
ITY, parity. Got it.
Right? Now, while views are similar among registered voters, Biden loses ground on 3 of those items among those who are likeliest to vote. So the registered voters, Biden leads by 15. Likely to vote, Biden only leads by 10.
All right.
10 is still big. And I would point out, it's July. Who the hell is a likely voter is unknown.
Okay.
So I'm somewhat dismissive of that. And also, we're expecting a large turnout, which also makes the likely voter, registered voter split less important.
It would tend to, you would think, yes.
because the likely voters are the ones who voted last time, and if it's a bigger turnout, then that's just plain old less important. So I wouldn't pay too much attention to that.
All right.
I mean, if the worst case is we only win by 10 instead of 15, I guess I could live with that, but I'm not even sure that that's true.
Yes, although I wanted the 15.
White Catholics, potentially a swing voter group, divide essentially evenly, 51-47 Trump-Biden versus 13 plus 13 for Trump in March. That's improvement.
Yes.
Trump won white Catholics by 61-37 in 2016, so splitting them isn't helping. So any way you look at it, these are just terrible, terrible numbers for Trump. There was a Fox News poll that came out with him +8, so it's all similar, but it all points to the same thing, which I wrote up in the Pundit Roundup. People who don't understand the pandemic, who wish it away, who just set it aside while they calculate politics, are just in an alternate universe from actual voters.
Yeah.
And that, by the way, includes the White House and many pundits. You know, the stories in the Times and in CNN talking about Deborah Birx and how her standing has fallen, talk about Mark Meadows and how he would just like to de-emphasize the virus and talk about other things.
But, you know, sure.
But it doesn't work that way.
Ahead, no.
It just doesn't work that way. Axios says a story this morning. The surge in coronavirus hospitalizations is severe, and it's more than just the big states that we're looking at. Why it matters, they say. The U.S. made it through the spring without realizing one of experts' worst fears, overwhelming hospitals' capacity. But that fear is reemerging as the virus spreads rapidly throughout almost every region of the country. And, of course, what they don't say is that also includes schools.
Yes.
You can't open schools if your virus is surging in the county that you live.
That's true. Or something somehow I don't know. I guess people weren't ready to debate that because schools have been closed this whole time, and we haven't seen what I guess people apparently in the United States people need to see it up close and have the virus to believe that it could be a problem.
Right.
Yeah.
So Washington Post, endangered GOP senators under pressure as Senate considers new coronavirus measures. There's going to be another $1 trillion deal. McConnell, of course, said that wouldn't happen, and we, of course, said he's full of it because it would. Not because he wants to, but because the pandemic is going to force it. We knew that.
Yeah.
And it is. And all of the governors down south who are not doing what they need to do to get this under control are going to wind up doing what governors have to do. Los Angeles is talking about closing down. Maryland is talking about closing down. Colorado's talking about closing down. These are things that have to be done in order to control things as needed. And just pretending like it doesn't is just completely missing the mark. And, of course, the public knows that. And as a result, the Senate is now looking very, very unsafe for Republicans at this time. And so what happens during all of this? So while the pandemic burns through the country, Trump is bragging about being able to walk down a ramp and passing a Montreal cognitive assessment.
Yeah, there was some bragging, but did the ramp come up? I missed the ramp section.
Well, that was last week, but it's the same concept.
Oh, yes. All interviews are the same.
I dressed myself. I should get the Nobel Prize.
Maybe. I mean, have you seen how long the tie is? But he won't accept that criticism. That's true. All right. Yeah. Yes. The what is it? Montreal assessment.
It's called the Montreal Cognitive Assessment, right. And it's very short. If you want to actually take a look at what it looks like, I have it here for you. You can just take a quick peek. It asks you to do things like tell the difference between an alligator and an elephant.
Right.
Count down backwards by 7.
That's not.
See if you can draw a clock.
Fun.
That kind of thing. He's very proud he passed it.
Yes.
In fact, challenged.
Right.
Chris
Another
Wallace
one of the
said
things.
you probably couldn't pass it.
Right, and neither
There's some
could
tough
Joe
questions
Biden,
in there.
and then he proceeded essentially to not only to take the test, but to recite the test from memory,
which is part of the test.
Well, that's true. Yes, that's.
They ask you to repeat the words and repeat numbers.
That was a great exchange. I aced the test, and Wallace basically says, "Yeah, I saw the test. The test is which one of these is an elephant?"
Right. It's amazing that this Tim Russert style of journalism, where somebody like Trump says a thing, and then the journalist says yes, but, and then shows the slide of them saying the opposite or something that refutes what they just said, has gone out of style. So yeah, it's true that Chris Wallace was simply doing that, and so some people are saying, well, he's doing his job, why does he get extra points for it? I saw what I thought was some pretty insightful analysis of that, brief.
Yeah.
But basically, Trump needs Fox News.
Yes.
The networks need Trump. Trump doesn't need CBS. He doesn't need NBC. If he were ever to go on those shows, they'd give him softballs because they're so glad to have him for the ratings.
But he's dumb, and why are they happy?
But he needs Fox.
Yes.
So he has to go on Fox, whether he wants to or not. And Chris Wallace can give him hardball questions because he needs Fox, and he still has to go. And that's why he didn't walk out.
Yes.
First of all, he never would have been on the other networks. And secondly, they never would have asked him tough questions because they know he wouldn't come back.
Yeah, he would walk on them. I mean, he'd make a huge show of it. Sure.
And make that a big deal.
He's
so,
Fox.
Chris Wallace was basically the only person who could do this, and he did it. So good for him.
I mean, I have no complaints about the way he did that. It is Fox, and he would have. I mean, I guess you could.
And by the way, people who watch Fox watched it.
Yes, that's true. People who don't watched it like I did, and clips on Twitter.
Well, but we already have our
yeah.
opinion. The point is try to persuade other people, and the ones who watch Fox generally don't watch anything else, so it's a good thing they did.
No, I think, overall, on balance, a good thing, and I think we'll start hearing anecdotally. I think they'll go to the diners, and they'll start finding people who said, I watched that interview, and I think maybe the president's crazy, and it's time for him to retire. They may very well say, well, let Mike Pence step up, and that's a crazy thing to say too. But it's more grounded than saying no. Everyone else is the one that's wrong. Finding the elephant is hard. So, all right, we'll be right back after a 2-minute break. There's so much you could mine in that interview, but so many other things, as we found out in the first 5 minutes of Greg's call, things that we had forgotten to list because of our frustration with how bad Trump is. We have an hour and a half left for that, and we'll be right back. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday, but our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to Patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We continue on. We could, like a fractal, we could look at the Trump interview forever and see the entire universe in it. But
hold up a jewel.
Yes.
And see all the different facets, and they're all important, and you need to try to take a look at all of them, but, you also have to collect it and put it back into a generalized picture. So the generalized picture is provided to us, of course, in a Vox-Splainer by Ezra Klein. How Biden is winning. Joe Biden refuses to play into Donald Trump's hands. His campaign is, quote, more about giving people who don't agree with him on everything permission to vote for him rather than a campaign about mobilizing his own base. And by doing so, he makes himself a very difficult target for Trump to hit, which is why Trump's swings and misses become all the more remarkable. Yes, he's not a woman, so the misogyny doesn't really play. He's a white male generic Democrat. So people who want to project onto Joe Biden what they want him to be, well, that's easy to do. I noticed that he's making overtures not for vice president, don't worry about that, but for speaking at the Democratic convention, he's going to get John Kasich.
Yes, I did see that.
I mean, that's more, hey, if you're a Republican, it's okay to vote for Joe. Don't lose sleep over it. It doesn't mean anything in terms of Biden's administration.
Yes.
It in and of itself obviously is insufficient to get people out to vote for him, but it's one move and it's one of many moves, and he's doing all these little things to get people to say, okay, maybe it's all right to vote for him.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting play for a number of reasons. To me, with the
better Kasich in my
memory.
view than Lieberman.
Yes, sure, true. There are worse people that you could invite. Nobody's going to be. None of the listeners are going to be thrilled about it, but it's a good explanation.
But it's one speech.
For why?
And it's one speech at a convention that's not. It's going to be virtual.
Yeah,
you don't like it, don't watch it.
That's true too. It's easy enough to watch. Change the channel. But yeah, what struck me about the idea of having Kasich there was my single memory, for all time, I think of Kasich was a speech that he gave. One of the classic examples of any Republican just being clearly and demonstrably wrong. He was speaking while he was in Congress, opposing the Clinton 1993, economic stimulus / tax package. And, like all the Republicans, gave a speech saying this is going to make things worse. It's going to be poison for the economy. It's going to be a job killer. And, of course, now we have the hindsight of what it was.
Right.
But his line was, I know it's not going to work. How do I know it was going to not? How sure am I that this isn't going to work? If this were to work, I'd have to become a Democrat, he said. And that was his big line. And, he didn't become
a Democrat.
One.
He's right.
He
was just, years ahead of his time.
That's just the point. It's like, he might not admit to having become a Democrat, but he is being asked to speak at the Democratic convention and maybe would actually go, and his purpose in doing so would be to defeat the Republican candidate for president of the United States. That's about as much as you're going to get out of
Right. Listen, they're not on the same scale at all. They're all different people, but for different reasons. I got a list of people I wouldn't want there, starting with Joe Lieberman, but also it includes Newt Gingrich, Stephen Miller, David Duke. There's a bunch of people I wouldn't want there, even if it turns out they could bring 3 or 4 votes with them. I don't care. I don't want them.
Right.
But I don't mind Kasich there. Let him, go out and say, you know what, my party stinks and I hope it's destroyed, and the best thing to do is to vote for Biden, and why not?
Yeah, I would take that. Does it change your mind at all if I told you that the convention will have a trapdoor over an alligator pit and invite those guys?
No, because it's virtual.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's
now,
true.
If it were real, maybe.
Okay. Well, I'm alligators. I could do that.
I don't know if you would agree with me, but I've certainly been convinced by many things you've told me that Newt Gingrich is probably the worst politician in this past 30 years in terms of ruining the American government.
These past 30 years. Yeah, true. But, okay, no more speculation about the alligator pit. It's real.
It's real.
Yep.
Okay, good. Anyway, so there's that, and that's the background. Yep. So let's do a couple of other things here. This is from the New York Times piece. As Trump ignores virus crisis, Republicans start to break ranks. And the pull quote there is David Carney, an advisor to the Texas Governor Greg Abbott, a Republican, said the president got bored with it.
Yeah, right. Another could be the
People
whole
are dying
2 hours.
all over the country. We can't open schools, and the president's bored, so he wants to talk about anything else.
Yeah, this is stupid. I can't do anything. Yeah,
right. This other New York Times piece, and they've had some remarkable reporting. Inside Trump's failure, the rush to abandon leadership role on the virus, and really highlighting the centrality of Birx's failures and how she differs from Fauci. Now, you can assume that this is all scapegoating and planted by Jared et al., because they have to blame somebody else or Mark Meadows. Okay. But it's still revealing nonetheless. The roots of the nation's current inability to control the pandemic can be traced in mid-April, when the White House embraced overly rosy projections to proclaim victory and move on. And guess who was making those projections? Inside the White House, Dr. Birx was the chief evangelist for the idea that the threat from the virus was fading. Unlike Dr. Fauci, Dr. Birx is a strong believer in models that forecast the course of the outbreak. Fauci's cautioned the models are only models, and real-world outcomes depend on how people respond to calls for changes in behavior. Sacrifices that required a sense of shared national responsibility. And Fauci has, quote, learned to rely on reports from the ground. Fauci declined to comment for the article.
Sure.
But he dialed health officials in New Orleans, New York, and Chicago, where he heard desperation unrecognizable in the more sanguine White House meetings. Fauci has his own critics who said he relied on anecdotes and experience rather than data, and who felt he was not sufficiently attuned to the devastating economic and social consequences of a national lockdown. As the pandemic worsened, Fauci's darker view of the circumstance was countered by the reassurances ostensibly offered by Dr. Birx's data.
Okay.
So a lot of ways you could read that.
Yeah.
But if you think it reads like a hit piece, that was the kinder one.
Oh.
CNN had one as well. And this is, again, all in the Planet Roundup. Let me
this.
give you the CNN one because that's pretty remarkable, too.
Okay.
Again, when it's CNN or ABC, I can't promise you it's not a self-autoplay thing. How Deborah Birx's political skills made her the most powerful person on the coronavirus task force. Here are some quotes. Her reputation is finished, a former State Department colleague said, mentioning specifically the moment in April when, with Birx sitting nearby, Trump talked about using disinfectant as a cure for coronavirus. It's one thing to be disagreeing on policy, but you're a medical doctor and you're going to sit in a room with this president who says you can inject yourself with bleach. I feel like she signed her fate in blood with these guys. She's a Trumper now.
Okay.
Here's another one. This again proves to be where the divide between Birx's methods and those of Fauci have resulted in a longer leash from the White House and a more vocal and visible presence for Birx. It's not to say she isn't fond of Fauci. She gets along well, said Birx's former State Department colleague who's familiar with their interactions. They just have different styles. He speaks his mind no matter what. She plays with the long game top of mind. Others ordered a less flattering perspective. Personally, we love her, but she tells people what they want to hear, and sometimes it's conflicting, said one senior Trump official. So, is it a hit piece? Is it the boys ganging up on the smart girl? Fact of the matter is, she is the science coordinator and the top science person who has been appointed so by basically Pence and Trump. So she's responsible for how badly things are going more than Fauci is.
Yeah.
And so she's going to take the heat. And the problem here is, sure, they're looking for a scapegoat, but that's because the worst possible thing can happen with this pandemic going wrong. And you know what that is.
For
Republicans might lose.
Right. That's what they care about.
That's what they care about. And so they're going after her in this article, which somebody accused me of being sexist because I pointed these things out. I don't think it's a sexist thing. I don't think it's the smart lady doctor that's being picked on. I think she's being picked on because they need somebody, and she was the point person who told them all that was going to be okay, and it's not.
Right, and, I mean, she did those things. She performed, it may have been the only option available to her to retain any influence, but, is where you should not
longtime readers of the show and Daily Kos, the pundit roundups, know I have asked for her to resign months ago.
Yes.
Because I think she was buying into crap. And now, it's coming back to haunt her.
Yeah, and it may well be that, like you said, it's a planted story or it's sourced from people who are interested. I mean,
how else would they be talking? They don't talk if they don't want stuff to be said.
Right, and there'll be some element of or some ability to find sexism in it, but I mean, maybe it originates.
But you don't need the story to know that she screwed up.
Right. Well, that's true, too. I mean, people are dying, and so the chief doctor is where you'll turn and say, hey, what happened?
I heard Birx and Pence, and I've been harsh with him, too. I heard them both say, we've turned a corner.
Yeah. Right.
And again, I quote you the Axios piece that says, we haven't.
Yes. Well, or any piece, really, that's based in reality. Yeah, it was a bad weekend for her, too, press-wise. And I don't think it results in any changes in the lineup. She's done the work she needs to do to stay
obviously they're casting around for somebody to blame.
Yeah.
And so, that's part of why Portland and other exercises in Let's Distract You are happening.
Yes. So many.
Right. Here's another
yes.
Also annoying from Politico. Why DeSantis yanked Florida Surgeon General from a coronavirus briefing.
Yeah, I saw that one too.
Coronavirus was sweeping Florida in April when State Surgeon General Scott Rifkes, and why hasn't this guy resigned, warned that people in the state might have to social distance for up to a year. Minutes later, an aide to Governor DeSantis whisked him out of the briefing. Said he had another scheduling conflict abruptly.
Right, yeah. So they should have just taken him away. Should have been federal police force with no badges. Should have jumped in there and grabbed him.
But in the meantime,
so
nice nobody sees him in public anymore.
Yeah, and he's gone. And they fired their data scientist, and it couldn't be any more blatant. But I don't know. We're in that era where reporters scratch their heads and say, "Some say it was brilliant strategic move." So
right.
Okay.
Josh Marshall summarizes everything. Not too much to say. That the entire weight of the federal government is now harnessed to hiding information about the pandemic and force marching the economy and schools into a dead cat bounce to salvage President Trump's reelection prospects. That's really it. That's what's going on.
Yeah, he seems to have done it well there.
Yeah. Steve Shepard from Politico takes a look at all the polling and says, polls show Biden routing Trump. Here's how to read them. You know how to read them?
No, but didn't he just do it?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's pretty much how to read it.
So what? Here's how to do it.
But yeah, he points out a couple of things, which is helpful. Okay. First of all, putting Biden's lead in perspective, it's huge, enormous, big one.
All right.
Number 2, a defined Joe Biden. Trump can't do it. Number 3, it's all about coronavirus. It is.
Yeah.
And number 4, don't misread the enthusiasm gap.
Aha.
Don't confuse enthusiasm for a candidate for enthusiasm about voting. Biden voters are as motivated as Trump's. They just aren't getting their motivation from the candidate.
Yeah, that's true. I mean,
Trump was trumpeting the fact that he had boat parades in his honor.
Right. Voter fraud.
Yeah. Boats vote like signs vote.
Right. They do. And when you put them together, that's 2 votes, and that's the voter fraud.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, I don't know why he thinks the boat. I don't know. I guess that's what you would see outside of Mar-a-Lago. So lots of boats or something. I don't know why boats would be.
Right. And then finally, for my abbreviated roundup today,
yes.
Let me take another pull quote from the Chris Wallace interview.
Sure. Why not?
When Wallace asked him, how does he reconcile the fact that he was wrong about the coronavirus and how it was going to play out?
Yeah.
Trump said, I'll be right eventually.
Yeah.
As my friend Ryan Burge, who follows religious groups and how they vote, said, this reminds me of a saying that older surgeons tell younger surgeons. All bleeding stops eventually.
Right, exactly. Yeah, you didn't stop it, it'll stop itself.
Yeah, I'll be right eventually. Sure you will.
Sure, exactly. And it's put a little less eloquently, believe it or not. This is what he did for a living, put things less eloquently. But George W. Bush, what will history say? History doesn't matter. We'll all be dead. So
yeah.
In the end, we all look the same in history.
John Maynard Keynes, right?
Wow. So, I mean, eventually, that's the whole thing. Is he says that right? When the virus will disappear eventually. Either could be
the person who said that in the long run. That wasn't that Harry, whatever his name is, FDR's advisor.
Oh yeah, I think so.
During the Great
long
Depression.
run, we'll all be dead. But that
in the long run, we'll all be dead.
Right. That was just, I guess, maybe W was trying to recall that quote. That could be. He frequently did stuff like that, right? Fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, won't get fooled again. Right.
So, New York Times sums up the panic going on in the Senate here. As Trump slumps, Republican donors look to save the Senate. Senators and donors worry that with President Trump in trouble and the House probably out of reach, the Senate could be their last chance to hold power in Washington. It's the Senate at all costs, said Dan Eberhard, an energy executive and major Republican donor. The House is gone, and the White House is looking increasingly like an uphill battle. This is not a good picture for us. Why would they want to hold power? I mean, they're going to. If you hold power, you're going to be responsible for the pandemic and the depression. Why don't they just give it up and say, okay, let's just blame Democrats?
They could do that.
Favor.
That's something they've done before. I mean, they don't usually surrender power, but once it's taken from them, they just say, well, see, now
I suspect there's a lot of them are going to jail.
Maybe. I mean, you and QAnon.
Maybe that fellow McCarthy had it right when he was talking about, who's beholden to Putin.
Could be.
Maybe the Republicans really are worried about some of this Cy Vance stuff and Deutsche Bank money coming out.
Well, maybe. And Deutsche Bank, I guess, also involved in the last crazed splash of I don't know what, of panic and excitement of the weekend. Very strange story surrounding the murder of the son of a federal judge in New Jersey. Everybody's buzzing about this one, and it was difficult to know what to believe because the first reports of it, for some reason,
husband shot, son killed by an armed intruder dressed as a FedEx guy.
Yes.
Or UPS or one of those. I don't want to demean their besmirch, but a delivery person uniform. So it sounded like a professional hit job.
Yeah, right. So they I guess claimed to be showing up either to drop off a package or whatever, and then must have, when they rang the doorbell, when they answered, pushed their way in. And so the husband of the judge, who is himself a criminal defense attorney, and so it creates some confusion. Is this a disgruntled former client ordering a hit? He shot the husband, and the son, 20 years old or so, has died. The husband's in the hospital, and I don't know whether the judge herself wasn't home or escaped injury, but what has everybody we don't know, in an uproar is that apparently the judge was recently assigned a case that involved some dispute that somehow brought in Deutsche Bank, which we hear a lot all the time with connections to Trump, but also Jeffrey Epstein somehow.
And
I'm not clear on the case. And are they two in the?
No,
I don't know. Why not?
That's what the whole speculation
You had me there
is,
for a second. I'd believe it, but I don't know what. I mean, it sounds like the case was so recently assigned that it seems like there was no time for grievances to arise yet, unless this was this is a warning to you. Who knows? This day and age. Couldn't tell you, but that's what's got everybody freaked out, I guess. And so it's on our record and on our radar. And if anybody figures this thing out in the next couple of days, it'll come up again. We'll clear it up. But yes, I saw it, but what do I make of it now? I can't. I can make nothing of it. So that's the
so
times
there's
in
a
which
lot
we
going
live.
on, and it's hard to pull it all together. But basically, Trump is losing, and he's panicking, and the Republicans are losing, and they're panicking. And that's a lot of why we see what we see. What they're not doing is addressing the reasons for why they're losing. And for some reason, they seem to be incapable. There were articles that were labeled Republicans starting to break from Trump. I don't really know what that means. They were talking about both governors in the southern states who were forced to because of the pandemic, but that doesn't include Ron DeSantis.
Right.
And they're talking about senators, but it's hard to see exactly how they're breaking.
Yeah, it's a nice headline.
Here's what the nub of that story was. It turns out that when McConnell tomorrow meets with GOP senators and tries to craft a relief bill for Americans, that's really a GOP senator relief bill. In other words, how to save their candidacies in November is what this bill is about. One of the things that was in the bill is more money for testing and tracing that would go to states. And Trump wants to block that. Yes. He doesn't want money for testing. And testing is the only way we're going to be able to open up schools. And so this discussion about whether senators are going to break from Trump is basically over that.
Yeah. That came up in the interview, too. And as well as the base part, where he was saying, renaming the bases, I'll veto the defense bill. He's saying he's going to veto everything. Although, when he's asked point blank about it, he says, I might, which means, okay, maybe he won't. But
yeah, wait and see.
Yeah. But yes, I saw those headlines, and, they're very exciting headlines, but you would have doubts, having listened to the show for a long time, that was true. And if you read the article, you would say, that is why I had doubts. This is not what they said.
We're all from Missouri. Show us the votes.
I guess so. It's been an interesting weekend, to be sure, and an interesting weekend for the major outlets like the New York Times, which, they do such horrible work sometimes in mislabeling things in their headlines. But then the in-depth reporters who do the long pieces always turn up some good nuggets. You can't turn off the New York Times as much as you'd like when they screw things up. So we just sit here and say, well, here's what they screwed up and here's what they didn't. So all we can do with it. So, yeah, I get questions sometimes. Why do you read us New York Times articles when they're so terrible? Well, we try to read you the good ones. And then the ones that are terrible, we say, isn't this terrible? I think that's what we're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, some promising news breaking this morning. A coronavirus vaccine University of Oxford is developing with AstraZeneca showed some promising results in early human testing, a sign of progress in the high-stakes pursuit of a shot to defeat the pathogen, but it's not likely to be here before November, so we still have to deal with what we have to deal with.
All right. Have you got that to send me?
There's another piece to this whole school thing, by the way, that just gets shunted away and really ought to be considered more in depth, and that is what law, what piece of paper, what constitutional thing says that school has to start in September?
Nothing. Our school starts in August.
Why isn't it better to delay the start but keep open than it is to start and then have to close down? Because there's a big study out of South Korea showing that the 10 to 18-year-old kids spread virus just as much as the adults do. Mm-hmm. And maybe, this whole focus on opening school really ought to be for K through 6.
Yeah. Well, that was Sweden's theory, and they're doing great. They're not. I keep getting people saying that, though. Look at Sweden. And I say, have you looked at Sweden?
But, Sweden's death rate is going down. Which is good.
From a huge
But it was pretty high, which was bad.
Right.
There's so much we don't understand about the virus. Why are some people susceptible and why are other people not susceptible, for example? How does it spread really? Is it super spreaders and only a few, or is it more? Certainly we know the more time you spend indoors with closed, poorly circulated air, otherwise known as school, the more likely it's going to spread. Yeah. We know younger children can, in fact, get the virus and get very ill, although at less numbers, fewer numbers, I should say, smaller numbers than older kids, but they still do get sick. And if it's your kid, you don't really care that it's less frequent if it's your kid that's in the hospital. So, that doesn't help parents feel great about whether school should open or not. And in fact, the majority of parents are not ready for this.
Yeah.
As badly as they want their kids in school, and everybody does. They don't trust that it's going to be safe. And if it's not safe, they're not going to do it.
Right. Or at least if they don't believe it's going to be safe.
If they don't believe it's going to be safe, then they will not send their kids.
That's where we are. We're starting to get our results back here in our county of what did parents opt to do. We had our deadline, and it's a mixed bag. We were very surprised, and we were going over the results and discussing that we thought that the majority, I guess one question was, okay, well, who will opt more frequently to, or what age group will parents opt more frequently to send their kids back to school? And we thought maybe the elementary school kids would be the most likely to return. And in fact, it was backwards. The majority, and it was if it was a poll, it would be a rather overwhelming majority. It was like 60-40 kids were not going to return to elementary school, whereas the high school students were returning in those numbers, where it's, in fact, I think, what we've been taught, probably more dangerous and people would probably be more susceptible to the virus.
Well, I'm thinking 6-year-olds are cute and 15-year-olds not so much.
Maybe. And, but, I think it has, I guess what's happening is protectiveness. My littlest ones, I can't send them back. They're so fragile and frail. And it might not be the case necessarily with this. Yeah, right. And I also thought, well, people would also say, these are kids I can't go to work if these kids they can't stay on their own, but my high school kids could. There's also, of course, the fact that I think the high school students are saying, my subjects are complicated. I need to be there with my teacher, or maybe it's social. I don't know, but it was sort of backwards from what I guessed, but I probably should have taken my guess and flipped it on its head because this is a pandemic and I don't understand anything in this.
Yeah, 91 DVOC.
Yeah. Right. See, there you go. The information on the vaccine that you mentioned, I'd like to see that. I saw at the same time the Lancet reporting that the Chinese experiment with the vaccine, a phase 2 trial, finds that to be safe and induces
the last tweet
response.
That I just put up in the
I'll be ready for it.
In Skype is there already.
Okay, great.
So that's the Bloomberg description of that.
Oh, okay. There we are. I see it. Okay, I was like, well, what?
Oxford AstraZeneca COVID vaccine study shows dual immune action. The vaccine increased levels of both protective neutralizing antibodies and immune T cells that target the virus, according to the study organizers, published today in Lancet.
Yes, okay. So that's the same vaccine then, I think. Although, well, I don't know. They're both published in Lancet, but this one describes it as a Chinese trial, and this one as a University of Oxford. So I don't know. Could be both.
This is Oxford. One of the interesting observations that people have made is that it's easier to test the vaccine than people originally thought because we have so many more people.
That's true. Wanted people with COVID-19 to test vaccine. All right. We got plenty of them.
Well, if you test the vaccine, there's going to be a lot more exposure than you otherwise thought. But that's certainly true for treatments. We got many, many more treatments being tested because we got a lot of people that treatments are tested. And there are people who are actually signing up for these vaccine trials because they're really interested.
Yeah.
So, we'll hopefully get some good news out of it, but it's too early to say.
Yes. Okay. Well,
there's other promising treatments that are pre-publication, which is also too soon to say.
Yeah. Well, but we're in the
let it
habit
get
of
peer
saying
reviewed
anyway.
first, and then we'll discuss it.
Okay. Well,
that
I'll track
includes
and see
magic inhalers that are supposed to make the virus go away that you may read about.
Oh, I haven't seen those, but
well, good. No, don't even look.
Okay, it's not bleach, right?
Not bleach.
Okay. So, as they're actually scientifically validated, we'll bring them to your attention. I just thought that, people like to know what's the latest, and I'll provide these two things, and I guess we'll have to figure out off the air whether they're the same vaccine or two different ones, and Lancet just has all the newest information, and the rest of us have to wait. Okay. Thank you, Greg. This is
anyway. We'll see you on Wednesday, and I'm sure stuff will happen. The Monday shows are always a little bit incoherent and mixed because so much happens over the week, and we just try to get it all in. But hopefully, we'll have a theme for Wednesday. Yeah. We have a theme for Monday. GOP is losing, and they're panicking. Well, it's probably going to be the same theme Wednesday, too.
Probably. We'll also have an additional theme for the early part of the show, which is there's a piano being delivered to my house.
Oh, nice.
So we'll be hearing that, and I don't think they're going to play the piano, but we'll probably hear a lot of
let me end with saying I think that the biggest overdone cliche in all of politics this year is going to be, there's so much time left between now and November. There isn't.
We represent that in the show. There's so much time in 2 hours, but you can see how difficult it is to fit the news in. Thanks very much, Greg. I'll talk to you on Wednesday, and maybe you'll hear about the piano at the same time.
Take care.
See you then. You too. Bye. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's see. See if I can find a quick answer to this. The answer is probably not, but all right, I'll provide you with the links here so we can see if we can figure out. This does say, or Greg said that his thing was published in the Lancet, in the Bloomberg News report. Just trying to scroll down. I'd like to get to the same page. Like, show me the link to the Lancet in the Bloomberg item so that I can click to it and see if it lands on the same page as the the tweet from the Lancet that I have here. So here's what I've got. We'll have to figure out whether this is the same thing here. Bloomberg story we just heard. Oxford AstraZeneca COVID vaccine study shows dual immune action, which sounded very interesting, like a toothpaste commercial. The tingle tells you it's killing the pathogen, I guess. A coronavirus vaccine the University of Oxford is developing with AstraZeneca plc showed promising results in early human testing. We heard all about that. Is there discussion of where it is? The vaccine increased levels of both protective neutralizing antibodies and immune T cells that target the virus. The results, there we are, were published Monday in the Lancet Medical Journal. Meanwhile, I have the tweet from the Lancet, which says, new Chinese phase 2 trial finds COVID-19 vaccine is safe and induces an immune response. And if I click to that, I get to a page in the Lancet, and they are two separate articles. There we go. So, I mean, it shouldn't surprise anybody that they're working on parallel tracks, but the fact that they both were reported in the Lancet caught me by surprise. Maybe I thought I was reading the same thing, but the Lancet is a medical journal, and I bet medical journals are packed full of news on advancement on COVID-19 vaccines. The one Greg brought to our attention is headlined in the Lancet, and they'll have their jargon and terminology. Maybe some of you will understand it. Safety and immunogenicity. Immunogenicity. Is that right? Have I pronounced that correctly? Safety and immunogenicity of the, oh, good Lord. I don't know how we would say this. CHADOX1. I doubt that there was a CHADOX, but I don't know what this means. Safety and immunogenicity of the CHADOX1 nCoV, it is the novel coronavirus 19 vaccine against SARS-CoV-2, a preliminary report of a Phase 1/2 single-blind randomized controlled trial. That is the title of the piece about the Oxford AstraZeneca work. The Lancet, meanwhile, runs another story in the same section under the title, another immunogenicity and safety. Now that's the difference between the two. AstraZeneca went with safety and immunogenicity. And the Chinese got it the other way. Immunogenicity and safety of a recombinant adenovirus type 5 vectored COVID-19 vaccine in healthy adults aged 18 or older. A randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled Phase 2 trial. So a Phase 1/2 single-blind over on the AstraZeneca side, and the Chinese have done a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled Phase 2 trial. .com.org.edu. You get it's a very long titles, but they're two separate things. That's good. Good to have everybody working on it, and good to have them producing some results. I am curious to see whether there's any impact of the anti-Chinese rhetoric and propaganda from the Trump administration, or elsewhere for that matter. I'd be interested to see whether that affects people's beliefs about the efficacy of a Chinese vaccine. And of course, with our combination of anti-vaxxers and QAnon weirdos, and well, the big problem, of course, is how far QAnon weirdos have made inroads into mainstream Republican politics. Would people take a Chinese-developed or Chinese-manufactured virus? It's an open question. Also happened to see along the sidebar of the trending stories in Twitter that, let's see, I don't know where it went to. I didn't click on it because it didn't seem like I was going to get to it or be interested in it, but it was that the UK had cut some sort of a deal for a very large number of coronavirus vaccine units should the vaccine that meets with their approval be developed. And I thought, where is our great deal maker president? And where is our securing of the millions of doses that we'll need? And I don't know. He's bored with coronavirus, so maybe he didn't make a great deal. I can't tell you how many stories there are that we have to get to, and we can't read them all. And I'm wondering whether the thing to do is read the headlines and say what, jumps out at us and not delve into detail, but that's very un-KITM-like to do. At the same time, there's so many things that we will never get to that they need to be on your radar. We'll see. We'll make a hybrid approach out of it. I guess that brings us to one of the housekeeping notes for the week. In addition to having Wednesday's show likely disrupted to some extent with the delivery of a piano, which may or may not extend to finding out that the piano delivery guys are huge Trump fans and coming in here and threatening to take the studio apart, and maybe me with it if I don't know. We'll see how that goes. But hopefully they'll be paying no attention, and we won't hear them. But worse still, in terms of the disruption to the show, is that our Tuesday program for tomorrow, cannot be live. I will be elsewhere. In fact, traveling to the in-laws, not to pick up the pieces of the piano that got dropped, but for an 89th birthday. We're not having a big party. We're having a socially distanced small gathering, but we feel like it's important to mark birthday, especially an 89th birthday. But gonna go down, and it's not a surprise, so we haven't ruined it or anything, but just go down and we'll take over the kitchen and bake a cake. And then I guess we'll slice the cake and throw it to each other, is how we'll have to do it with our social distancing. But no, not having a big gathering, but important to mark this occasion in some way here. So we'll be off the air live. My fondest wish would be to record a brand new episode with all of these stories that we're not going to get a chance to get to today to share with you, but that might not come together under today's conditions. We'll see what we can do. Let's run down some of these other stories. Wow, so many things to deal with. First of all, let's see. On the coronavirus front, news that America has become what Donald Trump used to call used the S word, crap, S-hole country, I guess. Apparently, down in vacation land in the Bahamas, is that right? They've they appeared to have their coronavirus outbreak more or less under control, but then they've experienced another new spike, and you could hardly blame them. They decided that, we know where this spike is coming from. It's travel from the United States, and so they're closing it off. The United States is banned from travel to the Bahamas. I don't know if anybody was planning to try to take a vacation. Lots of people are vacationing. I mean, it's crazy, which is why we have so much coronavirus and why we can't have nice things like vacations. But some people are going to try to take them anyway. If you're going to the Bahamas, that, I guess, is out of the question. Unless, maybe you have Jeffrey Epstein type money and think you can bribe your way into it or buy a private Bahamian island. And they may or may not let you in. I don't know how that's going to work. That's outside of my purview. All right. Another thing that we have to bring up over the weekend, another incredible development. John Yoo is alive, and they're allowing him to opine on things legal still, despite the fact that he too should be persona non grata here in the United States. He should be living in exile, but he's not. He's teaching law, ostensibly, at Berkeley, where they may or may not be having live classes come September. Don't know. But he spent the weekend in the news with, I guess here's what happened. We get the rundown here from the tweets of, let's see if I can get the name right, Aaron Reiklin Melnick, I'm guessing is how he pronounces his last name, a hyphenated last name. And he puts it this way: having now read the John Yoo NRO, National Review, the bad guy ones, National Republic Online article that is the apparent source for this thinking, it is wildly dishonest and wrong. What are we talking about? It is, explained here by the enclosed or the attached tweet, another tweet from Allison Zieve, or Zieve, Z-I-E-V-E, Director of Public Citizen Litigation Group, who had said, very curious to see how the Trump White House thinks the Supreme Court ruling in the DACA case, recent case, gives Trump the authority to issue a health care plan, and what plan that is, and to do so, in other words, without the approval of Congress. Look at how far afield we've gone. John Yoo, what does he have to do with health care? We know, unless his view is, doctors oversee the torture programs that we administer. So maybe it's health care now, torture. He shouldn't be having anything to do with this. But this is very expansive thinking, if you want to call it that. But I guess it looks like the thought is that we did not follow the DACA case closely enough on the show to figure out how it gets to healthcare and then gets to John Yoo. But maybe we'll continue with Aaron's thread to try and explain what's going on here from an after-the-fact point of view. Having now read the John Yoo NRO article that is the apparent source for this thinking, it's wildly dishonest and wrong. Yoo, implies expanded DACA/DAPA was ended by Trump and restored by this decision, which, no, he says. He claims the DACA decision involved the Constitution. It didn't. And he says, goes on to say, I missed this article at the time because I don't generally stoop to caring what John Yoo thinks, but this analysis of the DACA decision is just completely indefensible and dishonest, getting the basic facts and the law wrong. Not surprising, really, for John Yoo or for the NRO, anyway, to do that and to want to do that. The piece is entitled, I guess I'll have to click on it in order to actually get the full title, How the Supreme Court's DACA Decision Harms the Constitution, the Presidency, Congress, and the Country. And at least that makes a certain amount of sense as a headline, because what seemed to have been proposed by John Yoo, and I say this without having read the article, just reading other people's reaction to it, was, well, it's a very John Yoo thing. He came to the conclusion that the president can do anything he wants, anytime he wants, and the law be damned, essentially, was what was happening here. But this headline gives me at least some hope that perhaps John Yoo knows how bad that would be. How the Supreme Court's DACA decision harms the Constitution, the presidency, the Congress, and the country. Because it sounded like what other people were concluding was that Yoo had come to the conclusion, not you, Y-O-U, but John Yoo, Y-O-O, had come to the conclusion that the decision somehow gave the president, and Trump is the most dangerous president of all to ever hint that this could happen, because he believes that he can do this anyway, that he purported to say that it gives this president, any president, but this president in particular, the ability to govern with the power of statute, even if he could not get the Congress to adopt such statutes, that he could essentially unilaterally declare such a thing to be the law. And it's tricky in that it's a negative. How could it work? And it seemed like the emerging, this is probably just not being explained very well. And I'm sure that there are other, that's my fault. There are other explain. Here's where I should have started. Okay, how about this? We'll fix things by going back further in pocket to the Axios, stupid format of why this matters, what it is, why it matters. But it's Axios with the first report out of it, I think, or at least they think so, because they call it in the title here, Scoop, Trump's License to Skirt the Law. This has been a better place to start with this. Elena Treen and Steph W. Knight, right? Kite, I'm sorry. There's no N in it. It's K-I-G-H-T. Reporting for Axios. President Trump and top White House officials are privately considering a controversial strategy to act without legal authority to enact new federal policies, starting with immigration, and that administration officials tell Axios. So, okay, now you figure how we get back to DACA. Now, how it gets to healthcare, that's just expansive thinking. But the bottom line here seems to be, according to the early reporting from Axios about what John Yoo was writing, is that he was able to glean from this case that the Supreme Court had opened the door for the president to govern on issues of immigration, just specifically in terms of what's in the decision in this case. The case was about immigration. That in the area of immigration, the president could essentially order the under-enforcement of the law. In other words, okay, so Obama has left behind the DACA, and the president could simply say, for those of you who are in charge of executing the law and bringing charges, etc., where the rubber meets the road in the law, don't do these things. We don't want people charged with violations of these rules and regulations that Obama left behind, thereby rendering them useless. It's interesting, under enforcement alongside what Greg brought to our attention last week. Executive underreach. There was that article about executive underreach, and I know Patrick Snyder, I think it was one of our listeners, was very intrigued by that and has sent us some more material on that. Here's the Axios write-up. So, Trump and top White House officials are privately considering this strategy to act without legal authority to enact new federal policies, starting with immigration, according to officials talking to Axios reporters. Between the lines, they say, what does that mean? The White House thinking is heavily influenced by John Yoo, the lawyer who wrote the Bush administration's justification for waterboarding after 9/11. Yoo detailed the theory in a National Review article spotted atop Trump's desk in the Oval Office. So it's been put on his desk, he's read it, and who knows whether he understands it. But his takeaway is from the article. The article argues that the Supreme Court's 5-4 DACA ruling last month makes it easy for presidents to violate the law. Which, when you read that in the context of hearing John Yoo wrote it, you say, oh, John Yoo is celebrating the fact that presidents can violate the law, and now it's easy. Whereas, I guess if you look at the headline, you can see, oh, John Yoo is saying it's easy but bad, as opposed to our original thinking, which is that John Yoo would say it's easy and good. The president has brought up the article with key advisors to Trump administration officials, tell Axios. Yoo writes that the ruling and actions by President Obama pave the way for Trump to implement policies that Congress won't. Some could remain in force for years, even if he loses the election. Right? Puzzling. And that's sort of a weird way of putting it, because they also might not, and more likely would not, remain in effect after he loses re-election. But you, who next week will be out with a book called Defender-in-Chief on Trump's use of presidential power, tells Axios that he has met virtually with White House officials about the implications of the ruling. What's next, says Axios? The first test could come imminently, 2 weeks, very soon, very short period of time. Trump has said he's about to unveil a, quote, very major, which usually means he's not doing it, immigration policy via executive order, which he says the Supreme Court gave him the power to do. The order could include some protections for immigrants who travel to the U.S. illegally as children, something most Americans support. And that would be a very Trumpian move to campaign against that and then do it anyway, but say this is not DACA or Obama's policy. This is new and improved Trump thing, like we all thought he might do if he really felt it was necessary to come up with a health care plan, that he would simply do the Affordable Care Act and call it Trump Care and be done with it. So this is a possibility. Also pointed out here, that could be a political olive branch to Latino voters, though the Trump administration moved to end the Obama-era DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, in case you forgot. So they moved to end the DACA program, which led to the Supreme Court's involvement. The order could also include significant new restrictions on immigration that couldn't get through Congress but are favored by the president, Jared Kushner, and hardline advisor Stephen Miller, which means they're Nazi tactics, generally speaking. Driving the news, it says here, you told Axios that Chief Justice John Roberts' opinion sets out a roadmap about how a president can use his prosecutorial discretion to under-enforce the law. Here's a good explanation, sort of what's going on here. The recourse would be if the next president tries to reverse what's set in motion, and I imagine that he would. Suppose President Donald Trump decided to create a nationwide right to carry guns openly. This is by way of explanation. This is what John Yoo writes in the National Review op-ed. He could declare that he would not enforce federal firearms laws and that a new Trump permit would allow any holder of state and local gun I've ruined the reading. Would free any holder of state and local gun control restrictions. In other words, like I said, just come up with something fake, call it a Trump permit, and say if you got one of these and you print it out, it's a PDF, and you laminate it and put it in your wallet like they did with the no mask cards. I will, it will not be, there will be no legal force to it, but I will order an under enforcement of federal gun laws such that you will, in effect, have that right, so long as I'm president and agree to continue this policy. Now, it says here that even if Trump knew that his scheme lacked legal authority, he could get away with it for the length of his presidency. And moreover, even if courts declared the permit illegal, his successor would have to keep enforcing the program for another year or two. I don't really understand how they come to that conclusion. But what struck me about it was that basically what it boils down to is essentially John Yoo is saying, well, if you ignore the law, then you can ignore the law. I mean, this is almost the same thing as Trump simply saying, instead of me giving you a Trump permit, or I guess you could say in addition to me giving you a Trump permit, what if Trump were to say, I will pardon everyone who violates current federal law on this issue, or any issue for that matter, or anybody who's a supporter of mine will get a pardon no matter what they do. I mean, that's what it comes down to, is the president saying, supposing I don't take care to faithfully execute the law, and you can't indict a sitting president, and you don't have the votes anywhere to remove him from office, whatever. I mean, basically, isn't that what it comes down to? And to me, yeah, the answer is yes. Suppose I just refuse to prosecute or to allow to be prosecuted people who are supporters of mine who do things that I like but which are illegal. That's a bad thing for a president to contemplate, and really a bad thing for professors to write articles about that might end up on an idiot president's desk. So it goes on here, the Axios piece that says, with a reality check. This is a somewhat strained reading, they say, of both procedural history and the law. According to Axios' Sam Baker, the Supreme Court has never ruled either way on DACA's legality, but the Supreme Court wouldn't be able to decide the merits of anything Trump does before the election. That's likely true, and he knows it. Two administration officials told Axios that although the president has shown an interest in Yu's thinking, the White House wouldn't rely solely on that. I don't know if that's really true. You have to act in good faith and think that what you're doing is good and legal, one official said, and then he got fired. It's very much in dispute as to whether or not the president has that much control over immigration through executive order, a second official said. And again, that's all thinking from the before times when it wasn't YOLO and things did matter. What we're watching, they conclude with, is Trump told Chris Wallace in an interview on Fox News Sunday that in addition to replacing DACA with, quote, something much better, which is just classic Trump all the way through, and another hour could be spent on that, he's also going to be unveiling a health care plan within 2 weeks, which means not at all, that the Supreme Court decision on DACA gave me the right to do. And then they note at the end, the White House declined to comment for this story. So here's how we got to it being about health care. It was about DACA. John Yoo, said, well, the concept applies to larger things, or really to anything. Like, for instance, so I guess the thinking is, what if I under-enforce DACA? Would that be okay? And I guess their thinking is that the Supreme Court case, and I did not familiarize myself with that case, the Supreme Court said, yeah, that would be okay. That would be within your, your purview here, within your prerogatives to under-enforce DACA. And then John Yoo said, well, what else can we under-enforce? Could you under-enforce federal firearms laws? Does that mean that you could issue new rules and regulations that you would rather see enforced? Or can you do it in a positive direction or only in the negative direction? It doesn't matter because Trump grabbed it and ran away with it in another direction anyway, saying not only would he replace DACA under this ruling, but I can unveil a new health care plan that I can impose on the country with or without congressional approval because of the way the DACA case went. And I don't know who he thinks is telling him he can do that. But, what's the difference between, reality and fantasy for Donald Trump? If he believes he can do it, he'll try and do it. And the fact that the courts step in and say no is just fodder for him to say the courts suck and you should vote for me, so we can put in judges who will say the opposite thing, even though there's no basis for doing so ever for any reason, yada, yada, yada. So, okay, I don't know. I just thought I would bring that up anyway. So we could, I guess, take a look at the John Yoo article at some point to see whether or not he in fact thinks this is a bad thing. But I guess, like I said, what it comes down to is if I passed a healthcare law and said everybody has to follow this law, and if you didn't follow it, we would prosecute you, and if you followed the old law, we would not prosecute you. I don't know. It's weird. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. Okay, yeah, so confusion reigns as we exited from the show and into the break. But yes, basically, many observers saying, oh, yes, don't rely on John Yoo for anything. Aaron Reichlin, Melnick had concluded his brief Twitter thread this way: if the White House is seriously reading the John Yoo article and trying to base legal strategies off it, they're even more out of their mind than normal. Literally, all the Supreme Court said was, you can end DACA, you just have to actually explain yourself a bit better. And somehow from that, in the course of the crazy-ass interview with Chris Wallace, we got the president who may, there may be nobody telling him he can do this. He just got confused and said, I heard that the DACA case means I can change national health care policy at my whim, with or without Congress. And then everybody was like, who told him that? Nobody. Look around. See, does anybody claim that's true? I don't know. The boss says it, so now it has to be true. We're going to govern by, Wikipedia editing. Yep, it's true. From now on, the administration position is that the DACA ruling meant that Trump could revamp health care on his own. Now, what might have been happening here, we might as well throw this possibility out there. It may very well be the case that Trump has forgotten which policy that he doesn't like DACA deals with. Because look at DACA, right? We know what it is. We don't know what it is. We all know what it deals with. We forget from time to time because we're on the radio and we blank out about all right, what does it stand for? Deferred action. That part I remember, and then I can't remember what. I just read it like 5 minutes ago, and I said it in case you didn't remember, because I didn't remember. Wasn't it here in the Axios bit here? Now I have to go back and look again. But you know what it is. I'm wasting time. So, yes, okay, deferred action for childhood arrivals. Here's the problem with DACA. How do you spell it? D-A-C-A. What's the health care that he hates that we call Obamacare? Affordable Care Act. A-C-A. I mean, I really think he's that mentally ill that he's like, D-A-C-A is the same thing as ACA. How could it not be? ACA, ACA. This one just has a D. D stands for dumb. Dumb Affordable Care Act and Affordable Care Act. I like to call it the Dumb Affordable Care Act. People say that you can call it either. I prefer DACA. Other people prefer ACA. Other people prefer Obamacare. And I could see him actually giving this answer and nobody batting an eyelash. I mean, around him, we all be tearing our hair out. I have a feeling that he's confused the two and that he thinks he can change healthcare policy because this ruling was about DACA, which maybe, who knows, maybe he's hard of hearing as well. I thought you said the ACA. Not DACA. You see, I have no idea whether that is based in anything, but it's scary enough to be true, I guess, is basically it. Okay, so this is the story that I think may be going on, and I think this is happening because another part of the interview, which I said I wasn't going back to, there was another part of the interview during which Wallace says, hey, in your speech at Mount Rushmore, you said that children were being taught in American schools to hate America. Essentially, what the F are you talking about? And Trump says, it's true. I'll show you, who knows whether he'll show documentation. But it's true. And he says, Wallace asks him, what proof do you have of that? What even hints to you that that's the case? Why do you say that? And this was pure Trump. The answer being, well, if you take a look at the school, just look at the stuff, look at the things. How do I know? Because I read a lot about some schools and they say the things. This is what they do. These are the things. It's very much essentially the answer that he gives. And, that to me is always one of his more fun tells. I keep pointing out how many tells he has, but the problem is he lies about everything. So everything is a tell. If he's alive, it's a tell. But that's one of his favorites when he goes to the phrasing, if you look at it. It's more than a tell that he's BSing. It's a specific tell that he doesn't know the answer to what proof do you have. And he goes to that. If you take a look at this, that, whenever we're looking at something, whenever he directs you to look, it means I haven't looked and you should look. If you're the one that wants proof, you look. And his explanation was, if you look at something, you'll see that definitely it's true that children are being taught to hate America. And I guess what he grasps for then is he says, look at the thing here. Okay, in 1492, right, we're taught, all school kids are always taught, 1492 Columbus discovered America. Look, they're trying to stop that. And here he conflates, I guess, Black Lives Matter and the statues that people oppose, and people attacking the legacy, such as it may be, of Christopher Columbus. And we hate this country now, and we're teaching the kids to do that. In 1492, they're taught that Columbus discovered America, but now they're trying to take that away. And he then goes to, and they're trying to replace it with, what is the 1619 Project? What is that? What even is that thing? And of course, Wallace says it's about slavery, and of course, that's the date that they peg the beginning of the of American slavery, the importation of the first stolen, kidnapped Africans, I suppose, to Jamestown. But look, he confuses the two, and it seems, at the moment anyway, in the interview, that what he's saying is he believes that school kids are being told that, what? You can't even make out what he's saying. Is he worried that people are being told in school, no, Columbus didn't discover America in 1492. He discovered it in 1619. Or is he worried about they're being told, well, the real discovery, the real founding of America doesn't begin in 1492, which it doesn't, because Christopher Columbus never sets foot in the territory that becomes the United States. But it's just one of those things where I think he's confused the two because they're both numbers or they're both years. And, well, they're arguing about Columbus, and everyone knows that Columbus, what's Columbus? Who is Columbus? He's the 1492 guy. And why are you upset that we're being taught to hate America? Well, there's the 1619 Project, and I read that that's about how evil America is because slavery. Okay, I mean, all right. And so the two have something to do with each other in what way? Because they're saying the 1492 is bad, and they're saying that 1619 is bad, and they're both years, and so therefore the two of them belong together in the same sentence. And that's all there is in terms of connective tissue between the two things. And you'd say that's crazy. And it's so crazy he couldn't possibly have done it twice, except I believe he did. DACA and the ACA. What is it about? I mean, it might be the only other explanation is John Yoo is just as crazy. And he says this ruling about the immigration program, the DACA immigration program, is expandable to, he says, for instance, gun rights. And he explains how you could put the same principles in his mind to work to erase federal firearms laws, which I don't know, maybe that's an interesting hypothetical exercise for a law professor. And sometimes, legal decisions get rendered on those bases. That's true. But I don't think that you meant that this is a generalized expansion of presidential power that means that you can do anything you want on any subject you want in any policy area you want. But, Yu's crazy, so maybe he did say that. And so there's some possibility that he said you could do it on anything. But here's the real issue for rejecting that basis for having expanded it into healthcare. If you told Donald Trump that this DACA ruling meant that you could do anything you wanted as president in any issue area and nobody could stop you, who believes that Trump's mind would then quickly turn to, I will implement a brand new comprehensive health care plan for America using this new power, as opposed to, that's it, we're getting rid of all the fatties or something like that. That's exactly where his mind would go. This now means that as president, I finally am going to be able to use my federal boob inspector card that I bought at Ocean City, Maryland. And people have not been honoring this thing until now. And now I'll be able to, his mind would go immediately to, can't I get porn in the White House now? Where is my gorilla channel? And can I beat up people that I threatened to beat up at my rallies? He would not say, unlimited unilateral power, healthcare. That's what I'm going to do next. So I can't believe that he would put that together. And I can't believe that if he was handed that he would say, that he wouldn't say, isn't there something else we could be doing that's more interesting and fun immediately? I do suspect now, as I'm looking at this thing, that he might have said, DACA, that's the healthcare, right? And it might be as simple as that. He's a very, 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 very stupid person. And that's that. Let's see. Other things that I could share with you and still fit into today's show. Where will we go with this? Gosh. You should be aware, if you're not, of the fact that the Daily Beast is reporting, which is that the White House won't let CDC testify in congressional hearings on school reopening. Do you like that? Isn't that interesting? So we have this controversy about the school reopening plans, and members of Congress thought, let's hear from the CDC. I don't really know why they think there's, integrity or value left there. There are people who are doing good work. It's just all being suppressed. So what's going to happen? You could call them and say, testify. And the answer is that too will be suppressed. Pilar Melendez Aaron Banco on the story for the Daily Beast. The White House has blocked CDC officials from testifying in a House Education and Labor Committee hearing scheduled next week, that would be this week, on reopening schools. A senior CDC official confirmed to the Daily Beast. The committee's chair, Representative Bobby Scott, Democrat of Virginia, had invited CDC Director Robert Redfield, who was likely to lie anyway, last week to testify on July 23rd to discuss the immediate needs of K-12 public schools for safely reopening. But at the direction of the White House, Redfield won't attend. So same policy being put to use here on school reopening as was put to use in the impeachment hearings. Trump White House said they would disallow administration testimony not only in the impeachment hearings, but really they did say, well, we may just not cooperate across the board, impeachment or not. And here they're delivering on that. So he's delivering on his promise. In a statement to Politico, Scott called the move, quote, alarming, and said it came at a time when the CDC's expertise and guidance is so critical to the health and safety of students, parents, and educators. He said the White House had done a disservice to many communities across the country facing difficult decisions about reopening schools this fall and had prioritized politics over science. Yes, true, 100% on the money. The part that's missing from here is, and you should impeach him for it immediately. But they're not going to do that because something, and it's bad for something, and blah, 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 election. I don't know. So we're stuck with that one again. Let's see. Other important items to bring up. Let's see. I can save that one for later on in the week, or maybe I can squeeze it in if I can get a Tuesday show together. Other items to share with you. There's an awful lot. How about this one? This is a quick-ish hit. Happened to see this one as discussed over the weekend here at home. A Virginia story. Virginia Tech. A Virginia Tech researcher says his coronavirus-killing coating can be painted onto common objects. This sounds like something that might be fun. Christy King reporting this again for our Washington, D.C. area news radio channel, WTOP. A Virginia Tech scientist has created a coating that he said can be applied to common use items to kill the novel coronavirus that causes COVID-19. It inactivates 99.9% of the virus in 1 hour. Virginia Tech chemical engineering professor William Ducker said. The coating can be applied to everything from doorknobs to grocery cart handles and gas pump nozzles. Ducker's work with researcher Leo Poon, that's just as it sounds, P-O-O-N, so take that for what it's worth, a professor and researcher at the University of Hong Kong's School of Public Health, has been underway since April. Initial tests show the new coronavirus, officially named SARS-CoV-2, is undetectable 1 hour after contact with treated surfaces, but Ducker believes additional tests will show the coating is capable of quicker results. Putin is now testing it at shorter periods, down to minutes, and we're going to get those results next week, Ducker said. The researchers are hopeful the coating's killing power activates within a couple minutes, and if it doesn't, we're working on solutions already. We're going to try and make it better. The coating is not a disinfectant that only sanitizes items until the next contaminant comes along. This is the important thing here. One great thing about it is it just keeps going on and on and on. You don't need to recoat, rewipe, anything, Ducker said. Once the coating's on there, from now until Christmas time, and I don't know whether he means that literally or figuratively, it's going to be inactivating the coronavirus without any human intervention. The coating is also durable, according to Ducker. The American Standard test, which is slashing it with a razor blade to see whether it peels off, it passed that very well. Don't go slashing things with razor blades if you don't have to. Ducker has high hopes that the coating can be used in a number of places. I'd love it if we could roll this out and get it to companies like hotels, casinos, cruise liners, hospitals, and public transportation so it could start inactivating coronavirus in all those places, Ducker said. So what's interesting is that you put it on and it doesn't just disinfect what's there. It will, if a coronavirus were to land on a painted surface, it would die because of this paint, essentially. And it does look like paint. It actually looks like, anti-rust primer of some kind, sort of a reddish, brownish rust color. So I don't know how many people are going to be willing to paint it all over their property, but it would be interesting to see, or maybe it would be a good signal on certain surfaces that this surface is safe to use. It might be, it's an unpleasant looking color, but people might come to like it a lot better once they know about its effects in safeguarding their health. So let's see. He thinks it could give peace of mind to people who are afraid that surfaces that they're touching could potentially make them sick. I love the fact that the coating actually worked. I'd love to have partners to get it out into the consumer space so that people can be helped by it, Tucker said. That's something that would make me feel even better than inventing it. I'd actually like to see it used. The research is published in ACS, Applied Materials and Interfaces, I guess American Chemical Society, a journal for chemists, engineers, biologists, and physicists, and just regular interested people like John Yoo, I guess, probably also reads it as well. So there you go. That's some positive news on the scientific front. I was not really, I didn't have my eye out looking for that story to happen anytime soon. Let's see. Another important story, perhaps, or some thoughts to share on the school reopening front from Twitter user who describes herself as librarian, gamer, runner, 3D creator, and nerd, Abby Cornelius, who tweeted the other day, saw my doc today for an annual checkup. And goes on, this is a very brief thread, just to say her recommendations for me and my teacher friends. She's a librarian, so for teachers going back to school, how do you handle going back into this situation? And it's, it's as much as you imagined, but I thought we'd list things through in case any of you are teachers or care about teachers and wanted to share this information. 1, have at least 5 N95 masks. No homemade masks. Don't go with the cloth ones here. It's not that easy always to get your hands on a genuine N95 mask, but if you can, get it. Have 5 of them. And you heard this solution from Greg early on. Label them Monday through Friday and let them sit for a week in between wearing. So good idea there, I think. Next up, with the N95, though, also wear a face shield. So you're basically going to have to dress like you were, or at least on your face anyway, like you were working in a hospital. N95 mask and face shield. That's the most effective protection, I guess, you can get. How you'll feel teaching with it on, I don't know. But that's the advice. Third, wear a mask. And when you're wearing your mask, I guess, wear your hair in a high bun and cover your hair, because droplets can come to rest in your hair and then will spread if touched. And 4, when you get home, clothes go straight in the washer. And I would assume you probably want to take a quick shower here, but it's not listed there. But the clothes from school go straight into the washer. Number 4, don't bring work stuff into the house. And number 5, the really reassuring part, buy life insurance and update your will. Yeah, I think I put aside a story the other day about that. The teachers, this is how they're prepping to go back to school, which tells you how prepared we really are for this thing. Teachers are updating their wills before returning to the classroom, which really is a rather remarkable statement all by itself, and tells you what you need to know. This is, by the way, the same teachers that we were previously sending back in saying, here's what you do if a maniac barges into your room with an AR-15. You're supposed to throw a stapler at him, or what, and you're also supposed to be trained in use of tourniquets to stop the bleeding, because that's what goes on in American schools. Just thought we'd note for that. So yes, you are a first responder and you have to charge at mad shooters and take them down in order to protect your kids. And also you need to wear an N95 mask and a face shield every day and cover your hair, because this is fantastic. I don't know. This is what we're facing. By the way, another housekeeping item. I'm sure a future show will be disrupted as I fail in this protection program on point number 4. When getting home, clothes go straight to the washer. And this was an interesting thought I had this morning. Okay, the washer here at Kagro in the Morning World headquarters, the washer has broken. And I thought, I feel like we went through this not too many years ago, and the washer broke, and I had to go to the local laundromat and do the laundry while we were waiting for a replacement washer to arrive. But I remember specifically having to bail out the tub. It won't drain is the problem. Plus, the agitator isn't working all that well, and hasn't been for a while. And I got to thinking, how old is this washer anyway? And how long do these things last? It was kind of annoying, to think about having to replace. And we knew the agitator wasn't working right at the beginning, actually, of the COVID-19 outbreak. My wife thinks it was not working very well for even longer than that. But I remember thinking, yeah, this thing is going to fail soon, and it might be during this lockdown, and how could we even get a new washing machine? But then this morning it occurred to me, I probably could pinpoint the last time the washing machine broke by, and I don't know if the audience would have the answer, but by asking the audience and searching my old summaries of the show. There's probably a summary of a show posted somewhere that says that I complained that the washing machine was broken, and then I'll have the actual date. So we've been on the air that long, on the air longer than my Sears Kenmore washing machine lasted. And yes, you can use that in an advertisement, Maytag. Anyway, so that has nothing to do with anything, except that it'll probably end up disrupting another show as we get the old machine hauled out of here and a new machine installed, and we'll see whether we can do it outside of show hours. The piano has to come when it comes, and that's all there is to it. All right. Let's see. This, too, is very important and related to resumption of schools, but I'm going to save this one because it's an interesting topic for further discussion. Maybe we can do that on Tuesday, or, well, we'll see whether or not we share that. So we'll skip that one for now, and we only have time for a few other shorter items. Let's see. The other things to share of some interest that are on the shorter side. Let's see. I'm going to say this looks like an interesting observation from someone on the Portland, Oregon situation. Thomas Kennedy, who identifies in his Twitter profile as a Florida state coordinator for United We Dream, a Bernie Sanders fan, Florida immigrant, and an SEIU alum working to defeat Trump in Florida, and noting that another world is possible. But Thomas Kennedy, who says this: "I'm from Argentina." And you'll note that in the identifier, he writes Thomas Kennedy with the H in Thomas, but in his actual Twitter address, it's Tomas, Tomas, and then Kenn for Kennedy, Tomas Ken. He says, "I'm from Argentina, and in the early 70s and 80s, we had a brutal military dictatorship that used tactics like what we're seeing in Portland right now, kidnapping people off the streets and putting them in unmarked vehicles, in that case, to torture and kill political opponents. This is dangerous, though, of course, as we read on Friday, there's no reporting that they're even detaining these people for longer than 90 minutes or so, although there's word from other reporting that there are people who have been snatched up off the streets who have not yet reappeared, whether they're in custody or what, we're not sure, and we're not sure where they go. But the Oregon Public Broadcasting article indicated that they were being brought to the federal courthouse. But yeah, it's a good point. This is dangerous, and we are reminded this is exactly what they did in Argentina, and they've used in other countries as well, the secret police tactics. Other videos came out over the weekend that purported to illustrate an arrest that I think was actually, it was said later on in the thread, was taking place in California and not in Portland, Oregon, but similar situation, camouflaged troops of some kind, but unidentified, and carrying somebody off and telling other people on the streets who were forced to sit down on the street with their hands in the air under at gunpoint while they hauled somebody else off in the van, but not this person. And they were told, as they were screaming after them, well, who are you and why are you taking him and where are you going? They were warned, if you try to follow us to find out where we're going, you'll be shot. Which is a rather stark threat, I thought. Although really all that they could really promise is that they will shoot at them. There's every chance that they could miss. That's true. But I thought that was rather startling too. The idea of, if you follow us, you'll be shot. I don't know that that's normal police tactics. It's been very interesting, to say the least, watching not only what's happening in Portland, but watching the coverage of what's happening in Portland begin to expand. All right. we got to wrap things up. I just kind of wanted to note that one for the record, and note to self that I'll need that video of the if you follow us, you'll be shot at. Anyways, so try and substantiate that point for you. Let's see. I think that kind of wraps things up for what we're going to be able to fit in today. Again, tomorrow, I guess, unfortunately, I'll have to notify Joan. I should do that before airtime, that we won't be on the air live. We'll see if I can't put something together for you to share all these other stories that I wasn't able to get to today. I'd feel terrible if I didn't, but so many other pressing issues that there's every possibility that I won't be able to sit down and record them all for you. But if that should prove to be the case, don't worry, the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is up next, and I bet they'll cover any number of stories that we didn't get to today. And those we did cover, they'll take a new angle on. Let's see. Trump's changing his tune on virus testing, and apparently that can be pinpointed to Rush Limbaugh. We'll find out how on the program following us right here on Netroots Radio. Next, after that, the Walt Disney Company has dramatically slashed its advertising budget on Facebook. A growing list of stores across the U.S. will require customers to wear face masks, and Georgia Governor Brian Kemp sued to restrain Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms from even talking about face masks. There's more, and I'll share it with you. It's the international side of things after this brief announcement.
From Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Here's some international news. A United Arab Emirates spacecraft rocketed on a 7-month-long journey to Mars. It's extraplanetary as well, kicking off the Arab world's first interplanetary mission. And tributes pour in for 20-year-old Australian Olympic figure skater with a very long and very Russian name. He'll tell you who it is next.